Dear students, good morning. Let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 9th February 2018. The first article in different quotes. This article is written in the context of Pakistan, but I am going to apply this to the situation in India, especially the functioning of higher judiciary. Remember few points. In a democracy, any institution to enjoy its legitimacy shall have the confidence of the people in it. If it loses confidence, generally it becomes insecure and tries to become assertive. And judiciary is not an exception to this. This has happened in India too. During emergency, it was highly criticized that judiciary has played to the tunes of the executive. When it was asked to bend, it has fallen flat on the floor. That's how it has been criticized as. We have this famous Shivakant Shukla versus ADM Jabalpur case where judiciary failed to protect the rights of the citizens, the most important rights like life, liberty, etc., for which democracy exists. Now, after this emergency, judiciary has become very assertive. We got the due process of law and we got the independent appointment of judges by the judiciary itself, that is collegium system, and expansion of the rights. All these have come into existence after this emergency. So the judiciary has become more assertive and started claiming its independence. And to an extent, it has crossed the limits of judicial intervention to judicial activism. So today's judicial activism, we can say one way, has flew from the failure of the judiciary to protect its rights, protect the rights of the citizens during emergency. And a reaction of that was the judicial assertiveness. This is one way it is seen as. If you go to the Pakistan, the situation is like this. Recently, Nawaz Sharif was removed from the office by Supreme Court on corruption charges. But there is no proper legal validity for the same. For years together, the Supreme Court has become the protector of the military regimes in Pakistan. It has brought in a new doctrine that is called doctrine of necessity to provide legality to the military rulers. So in this context, the judiciary was seen in very bad light. But during Musharraf era, with the dismissal of the Chief Justice, that has become highly controversial, and judiciary started becoming assertive to itself. To gain the public confidence and support, judicial activism has become imminent and it is clearly seen as a fight against corruption in Pakistan. So in this context, is judicial activism is doing real good to Pakistan? Let me put it this way. In a democracy, when the institutions of the state are coming in conflict with each other, then to what extent this democracy can survive is a bigger question. So institutions coming in conflict is one thing and checks and balances are another thing. So in Pakistan, what is happening is not checks and balances. What is happening is institutional conflict. Big discoveries have small origins. This is about improving the research environment in India. So if you take China, United States of America, most of the European countries, they spend huge chunks of money, more than 2% of their GDP, on research. In India, the research tradition, research environment is highly bureaucratized and not very encouraging. The fund flow is less than 0.8% of GDP in India. And most of the money is given to large mission-oriented projects like ISRO, defense projects, etc. There is another area that is being ignored, that is what is called as competitive research. Competitive research grants, these are an important element of discovery across the world. If you take United States of America, the National Institute of Health, National Science Foundation, it provides for competitive grants to individuals or independent investigators. For example, if I am doing a PhD in a university, I can apply for these grants and get them from the government. But in India, a very little amount is given as competitive grants. But if you see the history, Raman spectrometer or sounding rockets by Vikram Sarabhai, these are all developed as a small independent investigator research. India need to allocate more funds to competitive research as like the other countries. That is the essence of this article. Next is ceasefire. 2003, there was ceasefire agreement between India and Pakistan. It was the height of diplomacy then to the Prime Minister Vajpayee. It did not come from Indian side. Pakistan has first announced the ceasefire rather than India being announcing it. Now, 2017-18, the very environment that was existing then appears to be receding back. These are the days of highest violations of ceasefire. The reasons are growing mistrust. And second is, in Pakistan, whenever an unstable government or non-popular government or appointed government comes into power, then the ceasefire violations are bound to increase. Normally during military regimes and also the governments which do not have popular support are in power, we have ceasefire violations because the establishment in Pakistan sees the showing anti-Indianism is a basis for mobilizing the people's support. That's the major problem. The Juma hurdle, African National Congress is going through crisis. The Juma's government in South Africa, it is riddled with corruption and interference with judicial working and misuse of public office for various private gains. There is a popular word that comes into existence here that is called state capture. Certain vested business interests have captured the state and its functioning to their advantage. The Gupta brothers, the business people, have captured the state establishment to exploit the resources of South Africa. So, the crony capitalism, the functioning of the African state is a typical example. Crony capitalism here refers to having a sound access to the formal powers in the state to gain business interests. So, in this context, a vice president has become the ANC's chief. His name is Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, there is a big hurdle acid test for African National Congress, that is 2019 elections. Now, as like in India, which had a single party system till 1977, the South Africa also has a single party dominant system till now. So is the single party system is going to break because of the existing corruption charges, we have to see. Now, should states have their own flags? Again, let me give you one paradox related to Indian democracy. So, diversity appears to be inconveniently sitting with growing nationalist debates in the country. So, I'm not saying diversity or nationalism as wrong. I'm saying that this is a paradox in which the diversity which we value the most in the country is sitting paradoxically with the nationalist narrative that is going on. On one side, we are talking about nationalism and developing Indianness. On the other side, the distinctive identities are also getting their significance. And the second statement which I am going to make for you is identity has become more symbolic and emotive issue in the country today. So previously, identities were used to nurture the interests and to mobilize the people surrounding these interests. So, initially when India became a country, most of the Western philosophers thought that it cannot remain as a country because of too many diversities and identities. But Indian democracy was successful in using these identities as a factor of mobilization surrounding interests. The reservations is a typical example. So identities have led to mobilization of interests. That's what has helped the Indian Union. Now, coming to this topic, there is a comparison with the United States of America. US has a dual polity with double citizenship, double flags, etc. Why can't India have it? That is one argument. And federalism is part of the basic structure of the constitution. And second argument is there is no prohibition of this. There is no prohibition of having a separate flag for the states, either in the constitution or various laws enacted by the parliament, either Symbols and Emblems Act, Dishonor to the National Honors Act. So these two acts, that is Insults to the National Honor Act of 1971, Emblems and Names, Prevention of Improper Use Act 1915, they do not prohibit having a separate flag to the states. Obviously, respecting the diversities will strengthen the unity is one argument. The second is developing subnational identities. Subnational symbolism, political symbolism, will weaken the national symbolism or will weaken the national character or Indianness. That is another argument. So, in these circumstances, what this author argues is India, if need to be united, we shall not encourage these sub-regional or regional aspects in the country. This person, what he argues is development of loyalties of an individual to a group is always to be encouraged. Now, it may be a regional, sub-regional, or national loyalties. Anywhere, when you are encouraging a loyalty to a group, you are making an individual to move from selfishness. So, the selflessness can grow by encouraging these loyalties. So, finally, this will strengthen the national unity. That is what is the argument. Development of one territorial identity shall not be seen as a conflict to the another territorial identity. And the next article, a disquieting silence. With regard to the issue of Myanmar, India was very much silent and it wants to deport the Rohingyas back to Myanmar. On the other hand, China has offered for mediation between Bangladesh and Myanmar. So, is India losing a high ground on this issue? And you know that UN High Commissioner on Human Rights has clearly stated that the Rohingya issue is a textbook example for ethnic cleansing. A boost to rural entrepreneurship. It is an amendment to NABARD Act. Two important points you need to notice. RBI has a very little share, that is 0.4% share in NABARD. RBI as a regulator of the banks, having a share in NABARD is a conflict of interest. Now, RBI wants to transfer it to the central government. This amendment facilitates that. And central government also wants to raise the equity in NABARD so that it can lend for rural entrepreneurs. That's what is this about. Coming to the main page, Supreme Court to handle Ayodhya title dispute only as a land issue. So already Allahabad High Court has divided the Ayodhya land into three fragments. Then it was appealed before the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court, rather than seeing it from a wider dimension of secularism, religious issue, etc., it is going to confine itself to see it as a land issue. Khalida Jia sentenced to 5 years in jail for graft. Now, Bangladesh is going through a political instability. One way, the Awami League chief is becoming too strong and powerful, and opposition is losing its ground. And Bangladesh Nationalist Party is rightist and radical. So, from India's interest perspective, Awami League in power is good for India. But to what extent, why did one party gaining support among the people will protect the democracy over there, we have to see. India rejects Maldives offer. You know, recently emergency was imposed in Maldives, and Maldives has offered to send special envoy to meet Indian Prime Minister to explain the situation. But India has turned down the offer there. Now, Russian military relations with Pakistan are very minimal. It is about new envoy of Russia to India's interview. So some important points are there. One is related to Afghanistan. He says that Russia, India want to have a peaceful Afghanistan free from terrorism, drug trafficking and conflict. So that's why on a broader scale they are not in conflict with each other. Second, Russia today is supplying weapons to Pakistan too. What about this defense cooperation? Envoy says that it is very minimal and it shall not be seen as a phenomenon that is going to change the strategic balance in the subcontinent. And then nuclear energy, if we observe, only Russia is the country that was able to establish reactors and produce energy on the soil of India. And then defense cooperation with regard to France, US, we are asking for aligning their policies with Make in India. Though we have become the major defense partner of United States, it is not ready to help our Make in India policy. So Russia is very much in tune with Make in India program. That's what NY talks to us over here. Kailash Yatra via Nadula to resume. You know that during Doklam conflict is going on, the China has suspended Kailash Manasarovar Yatra through Sikkim, that is through Nadula Pass. Then we have used the alternate through Lipulek, which is not very developed. So Nathula Pass, Lipulek Pass. Try to remember these two things. Next, in the last page, I gave you the notes that will be available to you at laix.in/civilsprep. Thank you very much. All the best.